Hello everybody and welcome back to PSVR2 review that I didn't think I'd be this excited to talk about. Today, we're tackling Snow Scout, and if you've been monitoring the PSVR2 landscape for a while, you might have heard of this indie game that has been talked about by the devs for quite a while, monitoring their progress and seeing how they're getting on with the PSVR2 version and all its enhancements. Well, finally, tomorrow is the day it comes out, and today is the day of the review embargo. I'm here to tell you that Snow Scout is a pretty fantastic little indie game that I absolutely loved. Sure, it won't be for everybody, as all indie games and games in general aren't for everybody, but if you love relaxing, atmospheric, and introspective games, you're gonna love Snow Scout. Before we jump in and take a deeper dive into what the game is all about, the gameplay mechanics, the story, and some of the little issues that I run into, some of which will be fixed with the day one patch and some of them I'm not sure on, feel free to like and subscribe. We review PSVR2 games and do PSVR2 stuff on the channel every single day, so a subscription would mean everything. Anyway, let's talk about Snow Scout, a wonderful little indie gem that I'm very happy has come to PSVR2 before the massive wave of bigger games later this year, so it has its time to shine. The story of Snow Scout follows you as you're going to an alpine retreat. You're going there before opening season to clear it up, make sure all of the ski slopes are ready for use, turning on the ski lifts, making sure there's no litter around, taking photos of wildlife, and generally just skiing around and enjoying the atmosphere. The only contact you get is by a woman on the radio. She's situated on the top of a distant mountain and is watching you basically at all times, monitoring your progress and cheering you on, essentially. Throughout the game, you'll talk to her about introspective questions, and while your protagonist is silent for an actual story reason and a gameplay reason that is really cool that we'll get into in a bit, you can reply by sending static on the radio. So periodically throughout the game, you'll get dialogue choices of picking between two options or saying yes and no, via sending one tap or two taps of static back at her. This will lead to different conversations and in the end will lead to a different result in your ending. Not anything on the scale of say Until Dawn or anything like that, but it will affect your final score and how the woman on the end of the radio will perceive you by the end of the game. This on its own is a really cool idea and something that indie games are really good at. Creating an artistic world with cool gameplay mechanics and a neat little story that makes you think. Although the story took me about 3 hours to complete, you really do get to know the woman on the other end of the radio as it is your only point of contact with any of the world. This voice will accompany you as you go about your daily tasks for an entire week, and the game is split up between days. Each day will see you tackle a different area at the ski resort in an open world format. There are 3 main areas to tackle as you do each day, with a cross-country skiing route between each of them, so a fair bit to explore here. Each area also has ski slopes that you can tackle and do different routes on and try and get different times and do challenges, but we'll get a bit more into the gameplay side of things a bit later on. Overall though, there's a lot to love here in terms of what you're doing in Snow Scout and the story that goes along with it, if you're a fan of indie games like this. However, how does it all look? Well, the visuals are actually pretty good, but I was playing on a pre-release build that didn't have the full anti-aliasing function in effect. This means that the game was a little shimmery at mid to far distances. It's a classic thing we've seen on some earlier PSVR2 games, and we don't really see it too often nowadays, but the devs have said in the day one patch this is going to be fixed. If it has been fixed, I will put a note in the description or the comments saying whether or not I've managed to revisit and have a look. I'm not sure if I'll be able to revisit on launch day, but I will add that as soon as possible. But in my build, there was a bit of aliasing around, meaning everything was a little shimmery, but the actual art style here, and once that is fixed, which it will be for you guys from what the devs have said, the game does look pretty great in its good artistic style. It runs unreprojected and smooth and flawless throughout, which is fantastic, especially since this is quite a heavy locomotion based game. Speaking of locomotion, let's get on to the gameplay here. You'll spend most of your time skiing, which is done by motion controls or by pushing the stick depending on what you want to do, but I would highly recommend going for the motion control option. It'll make you feel a lot more immersed and you actually get a little bit of a workout while doing it. The skiing mechanics have a hefty tutorial at the start, but it is needed and teaches you everything you need to know about skiing, how to turn, how to stop, all that good stuff. You can also walk as well, but skiing is definitely the preferred method because it gets you around fast and most importantly, is really fun, especially on the downhill slopes. There are 20 slopes to complete in total, and this was the main draw for me in the game aside from the cute little story that it has, and the atmosphere with this skiing mechanic. It genuinely is so much fun and they've nailed it. You can also take photos of the wildlife like birds, so you'll be traveling along, hear bird song, if you head towards it, you'll find a bird, you can take a photo, send it to the woman on the other side of the radio, and she will tell you some information. There are 9 birds to catch in total in terms of photography, and it makes for a fun side objective. Picking up litter is also another side objective. There's 99 pieces to find around the map, and each of these tasks that you do will essentially go towards the platinum trophy as well, which for you trophy hunters, even though I'm not one of you, I don't think the trophy will be too hard to get at the end of this. Besides this, you also go around making sure the slopes are in good working order by turning on the ski list, by putting the fuse boxes back together, making sure the slopes are working by actually skiing down them, which again is really fun. And at the end of each day, you cut down some wood, put it on your stove, cook some food, and go to bed. Rinse and repeat for the 7 days with some little variations between to make the days feel a bit more different and teach you new mechanics. And there's a lot of cozy mechanics here that make the game feel really nice to play. These variations day to day can be just going to different slopes, taking on different challenges, teaching you new mechanics, or occasionally teaching you something really cool, like causing an avalanche with an artillery gun, which is something you actually do in this game multiple times. Ultimately, it made me feel like I was on these slopes getting them ready for peak season, and that was the goal, I assume, by the developers. They've done a good job here, despite the artistic style, which some people might not like because it's not the most realistic. The immersion factor is good here. In terms of gameplay as well, the silent protagonist is actually used here. Not just with that radio mechanic that I talked about earlier for answering questions, but also near the end of the game, you get a chance to actually use this silent protagonist mechanic to full effect. I don't want to spoil it because it is really good, but having you be silent throughout the entire game does have a really good payoff that I really enjoyed, and if you're going to buy this game, I don't want to spoil it for you, just go and play it. You also have basically AR glasses in the game that highlight different elements of the world to you when you get up to them. These have an in-universe explanation and all that, but I found that the HUD that it adds is kind of annoying, but there is an option to also turn it off completely while keeping the key information, so I'd recommend doing that as well. As for accessibility options beside this, you've got everything you'd really expect, such as snap and smooth turning, vignetting, all that good stuff, and there is full seated mode support. The haptics of the PSVR2 were also used here, which is great. When you're going fast downhill, your head rumble will go off. Similarly, when you stop after a very fast run, your head haptics will go off, and the haptics in the controllers go off as you're skiing along. Ultimately, it's a good experience in terms of a PSVR2 port, and they've definitely put the work in. As for issues, there were a couple, nothing too major. Of course, that aliasing issue with the visuals should be fixed with the day one patch. But aside from that, I had one instance of me doing an objective before I was meant to, which meant I had to reload my save. However, you save every time you come into a new area, so I really didn't have to go back that far at all. Also, when entering a new area, my skis were slightly off center. I could still ski fine, but for people who are perfectionists and really notice this stuff, you're going to be a little bit annoyed having to recenter every so often when you come into a new area, and your skis will be a little bit further forward than they were before until you recenter. Not a big issue, but one that did pop up throughout my playthrough. And finally, one of my favorite things about SnowScout is just its message and its dialogue and its writing. Throughout this 3-hour experience, I found myself actually laughing along to some of the dialogue and really getting into it. There's something about the atmosphere of the game and being able to talk to one person only that made it feel like quite an intimate experience, and it was really, really cool for that. You'll get into conversations about music and art and nature, and through the game's messaging to you, it'll have you questioning that yourself. However, there are a couple of moments where the game talks about not looking at screens and taking in nature, which is a main message of the experience, but I did find this a little ironic as the game was telling me to not look at my phone all the time or anything like that, while I basically had a microwave with 2 screens shut to my face while playing it, as of course it is virtual reality. There is some meta discussion about VR in the game at certain points though, which is quite cool, but yeah, some messages were a little ironic when it was preaching about nature and saying technology is bad when it's overdone, which true, it is, while I wore my headset for 3 hours and played the game in one sitting. But overall, the writing I was really impressed with, and the character work with the one character that's on the other end of the phone felt realistic and felt good to play through. Anyway, that'll do us for SnowScout. It's a game that I didn't expect to love so much, but I really, really did. Thank you all for watching. Please let me know if you're going to pick this one up. Does it seem like your kind of game? Put it down in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to our patrons and YouTube members: Luke Bentley, Phil Irving, Azit Mirza, Ace Gamer, Hippie Pickle, Jin007, A License to Chill, Sun WTF, Fat Controllers, Jason Parker, Lamar Hall, Jordy Bandsman, Lemon64K, Callum Tierney, Mischievous Marker, The Underground Gamecat, Brian East, Alajimbe, D2Y, Underground Shager Gamecat, The Gamecat, Andrew Ehrenreich, Mark Smith, X King X Ping, Joseph Ash Legacy of Kanecat, Hook to Him, The Whoosier Gamecat, Outcast VR, Prophecy 777, Test Rate Review, Salvador Wade, FNCS Kieran, Sean Krim, and Gundy. Thank you for watching once again, and I'll see you all in the next one.